Hey guys, this is Jack from FPV Academy, and today we're going to have a closer look at all the different parts and hardware that you need to build your first quad and just to have a flying FPV setup. So there's a whole bunch of different parts that's on the market today, and you probably don't even know where to start or what the quad consists out of, and this video will help you with all of that information. Also, I'll be going a little bit more in depth on each and every single part so that you know what all the different variations are, what the functions are, what they do, so just so you have a better understanding of FPV flying. So the way that we're going to look at this video is I will be going over the parts in the same sequence that you would normally build a quad. So you start off with a frame, then you go on to the power distribution board, and etc, just exactly the same way that you would build a quad. That's the sequence that we're going to look at the parts. So let's get right into it. Now the first part that we're going to look at is the frame. Now there's a whole bunch of frames on the market, and I can't actually believe how many new ones are popping up all over the world, and it's just very overwhelming. You don't really even know where to start looking for a frame. So the things that you want to look at is what makes a frame stand out from others is the shape, the material that it's made out of, the thickness of the base plate, and then also how easy it is to build onto it. There's a whole bunch of different features. Let me just show you guys one very quick example. There's two frames that I have over here. This is a very small one, so it's a smaller frame. This is a bigger one and much more heavy. But you know, this frame you would, for example, use to fly very long distance flights and you know, get some very nice, smooth, slow flying footage. And then this one is probably made just specifically for racing. So there's a whole bunch of things that you need to take into consideration when purchasing a frame, and it all just depends on what you want to use it for. So the frame that I'm going to use today just to build this quad on is the Lumineer QAVX. Now what I really like about this frame is that it's one of the very few on the market that gives you two different options to finish off the top. So this is a racing pod, which you can use if you're going to be racing more because it's more aerodynamic, and then this is more just the general top plate, which you'll be using for freestyle, or you can use it for racing, and it comes with the standard GoPro 30-degree mount right over here. So that's really, really nice. So now that you know more about the frames, the next product that we're going to look at when building your quad is the power distribution board. So the power distribution board, what that does is this is where you connect your battery to. So when you plug in your quadcopter, all the power goes in here, and then this board distributes all that power to the rest of the electronics. So you will be soldering all the other electronics onto this board so that it can draw the power off of it. You also get a few different ones. The two that I have over here from the same brand, this specific one comes with an on-screen display built in, which I really, really like, and this one does not. The difference is though, this one is about 3 to 4 times as expensive as this one because it has the built-in on-screen display. So then what the on-screen display does is that just allows you to monitor how much current you've used while you're flying, and then also it tells you exactly how much battery you have used, how much battery you have left. You can just make a little sum in your head, and then you'll know how much battery you have left and how much longer you can fly. So this is very helpful if you want to save your batteries when flying and know exactly all the additional data that you need to know when flying. So this is a really nice board. So we will be putting this one on our quadcopter as our first piece of electronics. So that goes right there at the bottom, and that's where the battery connects. So the next part, the next thing that you want to look at is the electronic speed controllers. So what an electronic speed controller does is it basically determines the speed that the motors need to spin. So the next one that we'll be looking at is the flight controller. But then before I get to the flight controller though, the flight controller sends a signal to the motors that it needs to spin. And then the electronic speed controllers, that determines the speed that the motors need to spin at. So if you're going to be flying your quad, and the motors almost never ever spin at the same rate, and that is determined by the electronic speed controllers, which are these 4 little things over here. And each motor requires its own electronic speed controller. So your electronic speed controllers usually go onto the arms just like this. There's a whole bunch of different ones. So this specific one I'm just putting on here because it looks really, really nice on the build, and it is actually a very high quality speed controller. But you do get a bunch of other ones. For example, these already have the cables on them too, so it makes it easier for you to solder everything in place. You can just cut them the sizes that you need, and then these speed controllers will go on there too. And if you guys can see, it's almost half the size of the ones that I currently have on here. So there's a whole bunch of different speed controllers. And then while we are on the topic of speed controllers, it's probably important that you guys know that electronic speed controllers come with their own firmware on them. So there's different types of firmware that runs the speed controllers, and there's different versions. New ones getting released almost all the time to just update the performance of the speed controllers. So new versions, better speed controllers allows for better communicating times between your flight controller and your motor, and it just allows you a bit more responsive throttle, and your quad just flies better overall if you have a high quality speed controller with almost the latest firmware updated onto it. So that's your electronic speed controller. The next product is the motors. So when looking at motors, I'll be grabbing these for this build, but let's just quickly explain a little bit more about motors. Now the motors come in different sizes, and the two different things you need to look at when buying a motor is the width and the height of the stator. Now the stator inside is where all the windings are turned around, and that has a certain diameter and it has a certain height. So this motor, for example, that I have over here, this black one, is a 2205. So that means that the stator width is 22 millimeters and the height is 6 millimeters. This one that I have over here on my left hand, which is the red one, this is a 2008. So this is a 20 millimeter stator width and 8 millimeters high. So this is actually a very, very unique motor. There's not a lot of these on the market. The ones that are mostly widely used on the market are probably the 2206 size. So the 2206 is what I have right over here, and these are the ones that we will be using to put on our quad. These are really nice motors. They're made by Lumineer, the 2206, and then the next piece of information you want to know about a motor is the kV. So what kV stands for is it's just the revolution per voltage, so the RPM per volt pretty much. So these specific ones are 2350 kV, so 2350 kV. The higher the kV, the faster the motors turn, but then also the more they warm up, the more hot they get, and then also sometimes they're not as durable because they spin so fast that, for example, the magnets will start demagnetizing, or the magnets inside will start getting loose. There's a whole bunch of things that go wrong with it, so it's very difficult to find a high quality motor with a high kV and with enough torque and all the other very important data that a motor needs to be able to have. So these motors are going on next, and that's where the motors go. They all go on 4 different arms. So let's just attach these on here. Okay, so once we have the motors, then the 3 cables from the motor will be attached to the electronic speed controller, and then the electronic speed controller will be attached to the power distribution board, and then from the electronic speed controller there's another 2 cables that go to the flight controller. So this is the flight controller. It's the whole brains of the entire setup. And so what the flight controller does is all the inputs that you make on your sticks, everything that you do, it goes through the flight controller and it tells everything else on the quadcopter what it needs to do. The thing that makes flight controllers stand out from each other is just the quality of little electronic components that's used on it. A more high quality flight controller will allow you to have faster response rates, which then again just allows your quad to be more reactive and also just handle, for example, high-speed braking and high-speed cornering a little bit better than what older flight controller with not the latest hardware on it will do. So this is the flight controller. This comes on next, and that connects right over there. And then while the flight controller is on here, another thing, like I don't know if I just mentioned this, but I'll just mention it again, is that from your electronic speed controller, you have 2 cables that connects to your flight controller, and then that tells the speed controllers that this is the speed that you need to be turning those motors at. So that's the whole little base setup, and if we have all of this connected, we can almost fly the quad. The only thing we really need is a receiver that binds the controller to your quadcopter so that it reacts to the inputs that you give. But we're not just flying this as a normal quadcopter, we are making this an FPV quadcopter. So the next thing we want to make it FPV is a camera. So this is your eye in the sky. This is what you will be using when you are flying FPV and looking through. So there's a whole bunch of different cameras. This specific one is the Runcam Swift. It's a really nice camera, and the sizing of it is a very standard size. So most of the cameras have this specific form factor because a lot of the frames are made to support this form factor of camera. So both of these pods that I talked about earlier for the specific frame already have mounting holes that you can mount the camera in the frame very easily. And then also you get different cameras with different qualities. You also get cameras that work really well in low light conditions. There's a whole bunch of different ones, but I wouldn't really go into detail too much about them, because as long as you have a camera that is a high quality and that is recommended by a lot of people, then you'll be fine. So this is the next one that we're looking at, and that goes on right there on the front. So once you have your camera connected, well, the next thing we need is you want to be able to transmit that camera signal to to your goggles. So to do that, you need a visual transmitter. And so there's a whole bunch of different visual transmitters, and the ones that I have over here are two very popular, widely used ones. So this is a little click button transmitter, and then it allows you to change the frequency of the visual feed that you're sending to your goggles. You can just easily change that frequency on here, and you can see on which one you are by looking at the little LEDs on there. And then this is also another visual transmitter, which is a little bit smaller, and it comes with a pigtail. And what the pigtail does is it just allows you to mount your antenna, which you connect to the top over here just in different ways, and it makes it a little bit more flexible inside your build. Now, another important thing to understand about visual transmitters are that they have different power outputs. So this one over here that I have is a 200 milliwatt, which is the most widely used one as well. And then this one over here can range between 25, 200, 600, and 800 milliwatts. So this is really nice because depending on where you're flying, if you're flying in a competition, you get limited to 200 milliwatts, because anything over 200, usually if somebody else is on a frequency very close to the one that you're flying on, if you have a more powerful transmitter than them, then your visual will actually leak over to their goggles, and then they will have a very bad signal when they're flying. So it's really important to have a high quality visual transmitter. So the next part in our build is the antenna. So the antenna then attaches to the visual transmitter, because without an antenna, that signal isn't really going to go anywhere. So the antenna attaches to the visual transmitter, and then this attaches to your camera, and then once this whole setup is running, then you basically have FPV. So just on the topic of antenna, so antenna has really changed over the year. There has been a lot of new iterations. Just to show you guys the difference real quick, this is where we were 1 year ago, and this is where we are right now. Just look at that size difference. The technology of FPV flying is changing extremely rapidly, and this is where we are right now, and it's just really, really exciting to be able to see, you know, well, this is how small things are getting. So once you have this whole little setup attached, that then goes on your quadcopter. And what we have over here is a complete FPV quadcopter. So if everything is wired up here, everything will work perfectly, and it's basically ready to fly. You can then just decide whether you want the racing pod on top, if you're going to be racing mostly, or then whether you want this little plate at the top if you want to be able to access your hardware easily, or if you want to mount a GoPro. It's all just up to you. So this is the whole quad. Then there's a few other things that we still need as well. And the next little part is the radio receiver. So you have this radio that you fly with, and then how does the quadcopter know what it needs to do? And that's where this little guy comes in. So this is the little antenna on the radio receiver. This radio receiver then goes on top of the quadcopter as well, and then that is what communicates with your radio when you're flying. So that then kind of finishes the entire build. Once that is set up and binded to your radio, you are basically ready to fly. Then that's everything that you need to be able to fly FPV. So the next thing we want to look at then though is goggles. So you get different goggles. This specific one is the Fat Shark Dominator HDV2. This is a really widely and popularly used goggle because it's very nice. Because of the form factor. It's very, very small. It fits in your bag very easily. There's a whole bunch of different goggles that's huge. That's just one single screen. This specific one comes with two screens. If you can see on the back there's two different holes that you can look through. And this is just a very nice general goggle that people use. It is more on the expensive side, so it is more a premium goggle. If you can afford it, I would recommend this any day. However, there are a lot of other different cheaper alternatives of goggles. So then when you have the goggles, how does it know what visual feed it needs to look at? If 10 guys are flying, how's it going to know it needs to look at your video? So the thing that we need for that is your visual receiver. So there's a whole bunch of different ones. The specific one that I have over here is the Furious TrueD Diversity. So what makes this one really nice is that it comes with two different antennas. And that is what diversity means. It allows you to screw on two antennas, so one over here at the bottom and another one at the top. Let me grab this antenna, that goes on there, and then you have two different antennas to receive the signal. Another little one is this very widely and popularly used one, and this one is a great receiver, but it only has one antenna, so you can't use two. It doesn't have the same reach and signal clarity as this specific one. And also this one has a little buttons that you switch the channel over here, whereas this one actually has a screen and it tells you exactly which channel you're on, so you know exactly, you can see very quickly which one you're on, and then also you can swap through the channels very easily. If you want to see what your friends are flying, what they're doing, you just quickly, there's a wheel on the side, you click through the wheel and then you can see how they're flying. So that is the goggles. And then while I'm actually on the goggles, I just realized I didn't mention this on the antennas. This is a patch antenna. So a patch antenna is really nice too when you're flying FPV, because this gives a much stronger signal than this. This signal, however, is all around you. No matter where you are, as long as it's like this, it gives a signal in a circular sphere around it. And then this specific one, however, gives a signal in a direction. So this is more for directional use, but what does make this nice is it switches between the two, whichever one's the strongest. So if you're flying very far that way, you can maybe just tilt your head a little bit and point that towards it, and then you'll get some more range. So that is just a different type of antenna that you get. Now, I did touch a little bit on the radio, but let me just go a little bit more into detail about radios. So the radios there's a whole bunch of different ones on the market, and the only thing that really makes it different when you're setting it up is a specific radio has a specific receiver. So this radio's receiver looks like this, and then if you had a different radio, the receiver will look a little bit different and then just function a little bit differently too. But that's your radio. There's a whole bunch of them on the market, and I can't really talk more about it. They all have two sticks that you fly with, and it's very, very basic, but this is probably the most widely used radio that I would recommend if you have the budget to purchase one. Now, the next thing that we'll talk about is propellers. So there's a whole bunch of different propellers. This specific propeller is very new to the market. It is specifically made for racing, has a lot of power, but it drains your battery really, really quickly. So then the next propeller is this one, and this is a 4-bladed propeller. So this gives a little bit more thrust, but then it's not as efficient as the others because it has another blade on it, which makes it draw a little bit more power. The next one, which is the most widely used propeller, is the tri-blade, and I personally only fly these. I really enjoy these propellers, and this is the ones that we're going to be putting on our quad. So let's quickly grab all these propellers that I have, and then let's put them on here. Now, the propellers also come in two different directions, so you have to make sure that you put the right propeller on the right motor. And let me just explain that real quick. That is because these two motors spin the same direction and these two motors spin the opposite direction. If they don't have the right propellers on and you arm your quad and you want to start flying, then it might give you thrust in the wrong direction and your quad will just flip over. So there's usually 4 propellers in the bag, and they come in pairs. 2 of them are the same and the other 2 are the same. And then you just have to make sure that you put them on the right motors. So then the last final little piece in this whole entire big puzzle is batteries and chargers. So let me quickly talk about this battery. So batteries come in different milliamp hour, which is the battery size. So this specific battery is a 1800 milliamp hour. So that is the capacity of the battery. This specific one is a 1300 milliamp hour. So this battery has a little bit more capacity, so you can fly for longer if you fly this specific battery. Another really important thing to know about batteries is that they come in different cell amounts. So this battery has 3 cells and this battery has 4 cells. And the way that we see that is that you can see this one has 1, 2, 3 if you count it, and this specific one has 1, 2, 3, 4. The more cells there are, the more power it has, because the cells on this battery is in series, and then if they are in series, if there's more cells, then it's going to have just a lot more power. So then also another important thing to know about batteries is the C rating. And what the C rating is, that just basically tells you the amount that it can be discharged. So this battery is rated at 45C and this battery is rated at 75C. I can go more into detail, but batteries are usually, there's a lot of information about them that you need to know. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. Just know that the higher the C rating on the battery, the more power it allows you to draw from it. So this specific one is 75C, and this is the one that I will be using if I'm going to be racing. That's why it says racing series on it, because I can draw more power. If my whole setup, for example, draws 100 amps rapidly, this is a 75C at a 1300 milliamp hour, then this battery will be able to handle that because it allows you about 100 amps continuous, which is what they claim. And then also it has a burst rating of 150C, so if you're bursting your quad with a ton of power, then this battery should be able to handle it. So that's batteries. The next one we want to look at, and the final one, is chargers. So this specific charger that I have over here, this is the Hi-Tech X4, and it allows you to charge 4 different batteries at a time. What I really like about this charger is that it is AC and DC, so you can plug it into the wall, or if you're out at the field and you have a car with a battery, which you obviously do, then you can just plug it in straight onto the car using these cables. So, ooh, there goes our quad. Sorry about that. So once you have these plugged in onto your battery, you just clip it onto it, and then you'll be able to charge your batteries really easy using this charger, which is what I really like. And then another thing to know about the chargers are just that they are rated at different watt allowances. So then also you get what they call a parallel charging board, so which allows you to charge more than one battery on a port. So if I had one parallel charging board for this charger and I charge them all just on the one side here, then I would be able to charge about 4 different batteries. But if this charger was rated at, let's say, 100 watt, then because of that, it limits it down to actually only 2. So this charger is great if you're charging 4, but you probably want a charger that has a little bit higher wattage allowance, such as the iCharger, which a lot of the guys also use. I hope this gets you excited. When I talk about this, it makes me really excited and I just want to go out and fly. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. In the future videos, I'll talk a little bit more about products, and I'll also be going over building your own quadcopter. So if you are interested in building your own quad, then make sure you subscribe to this channel. I would really appreciate that. And then I just hope to see you guys in that video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys then.
Thank you.